In the earlier lesson, we generated lines. Now we want to generate some additional cars that we can use and output those values to the player. So we've got our lines, and when we refresh this, so to break out of that, going back into our application, into our CSS, we should create some additional cars as well. So we can just call them enemy. And we're going to update the background color for them as we're generating them out. So they're going to have the same properties as our initial cars, so they're the same size, and they're going to have the same feel and look to those. So going into our application, so just as we created some lines, we should also create some additional cars. So within the start game, we created our lines here. Let's take this, what we did earlier, and also create, instead of just having the player, we're going to add in and add some cars as well. So we'll call them enemy. So these are divs. And these are the enemy elements. And we surely don't need 10. How about we do 3 for now? And we're going to generate them to have y to be equal to, and I want to start them off at a negative position so they're not already on the screen. So have them at y minus, and let's use a random value here for that we're going to generate out. And we're going to use the JavaScript math function. So math floor math random times 200, or let's do times 500. And then we're going to multiply it by -1. So this is going to give us a random position for I of that particular element. So they're all essentially going to be off screen once we start up. And add in the enemy Y position there as its starting point. And then add them into the game area. And also going to set the background color so we can distinguish them to style and background color. So we'll set them all to red for now. So they're all red. Now we need to get them moving. So just as we moved the lines, we can create a function in our play game to move our enemies. So move enemy. And I'll copy out the function where we move the lines. And instead of move lines, update that to move enemy. And selecting those elements that have a class of enemy, just going down to make sure. So instead of adding a class of line, we need to add the class of enemy to them. Give it more of a generic object name there, so element, and we can keep item there as well. And instead of subtracting 1500 from it, let's update this and set it to be equal to, we could also keep the subtracting of the 1500. And we also need to add in the positioning of the item to the left. So adding in a style left. This is where we can use math floor and math random. And let's multiply it by 150 because we know we've got 200 width for the road. Don't forget to add in the pix. And then we've got 50 width for the width of the car. And we also need to use this down where we've generated the element. So not just top, we need to also specify that we are adding in left position, so they're not all within that same line. And we can generate this randomly as well. So instead of having the math value here as random, so we can space it out a little bit better. Gonna remove that and set this to x plus 1, and then multiply that by a value of 600. So that will space out our enemies a little bit better. And we can keep the enemy y value the same. So now you can see that they've been generated and there is spacing between them, and they're always randomly positioned, so either on the left or the right. And then that one kind of showed up a little bit unexpectedly. So we need to also take that into consideration where we're going to multiply it and we're going to subtract out 600 from it. So going up, just do a quick adjustment here. And we're going to set the value of y to be negative 600. So try that out, run through that one more time. And now we've got some better spacing between the enemies. And you can see that they're always coming right off of the top. So go ahead and add this into your application, and you can be ready to move on to the next part where we're going to be doing collision detection. And that's going to be wrapping up the game where we're going to check to see if this car is overlapping any one of these enemies. And if it is, then the game's over.